Hello, friends. I'm Andy Welfle. I use he and him pronouns, and I'm very excited to see you here at Tempo. If you're listening to this and not seeing my video, I'm a white cisgendered man in my late 30s with brown hair, brown glasses, and I'm sitting in my home office in San Francisco, California, in front of a bookshelf with many, many books on it. You probably know me best, if you know me at all, from writing this book with my friend and co-author, Michael Metz. It's about UX writing and how writing is a form of design. But what you may not know about me is that I started a content design practice here at Adobe and eventually built a team. We're in the process of hiring our 10th person. It's that second thing I want to talk to you about today. This is for those of you who are in the position I was in about 4 years ago. You're a content design leader, or perhaps a solo practitioner, and you're considering whether or not to be a people manager. Well, first of all, congratulations. This industry is evolving and growing, and it's an exciting time to lead a team right now. It's a tough decision, and it's one that I was not originally planning on making for myself. The idea of being in charge of people's careers filled me with a sense of fear and dread, especially when I see tweets like this from Vidika Bansal. Vidika tweets, "I once read that your manager has a greater impact on your health than your doctor," and I think about that a lot. No pressure. She goes on to say, a good manager, on the other hand, can subtly contribute to your health in positive ways by doing things like acknowledging your needs, providing opportunities for you to grow and feel valued, helping prevent and manage burnout, ensuring you get rest, minimizing your stress, etc. What her thread really shows is what a positive impact you can have as a manager on somebody's life. And if you're prepared to take that very seriously, and you are, aren't you? It can be one of the most rewarding experiences of your life. Before I get there, though, there's one thing I want to get out there in the open. It's something that I can't stop thinking about. It's capitalism, and we are mired in it. Speaking only for myself, as a middle manager at a big company in Silicon Valley, I know that I'm a small cog in a large machine that exists to make billionaires even richer. And here in the year of our Lord 2022, it's not always clear or straightforward how that happens. It's really important for us to know our place in the system. Before you make a decision about becoming a people manager, you'll be in a position where you're asked to extract as much value out of the labor of your employees. That's the essence of your role. At least here in the US, if your company workers unionize, you can't join them. You are who they're protecting themselves against by unionizing. I don't know about you, but I find this deeply uncomfortable. I started managing people on my team because I truly care about the folks on the team, and I really relish the idea of helping them grow in their careers and their lives. That gives me energy and happiness. I hope that if you're considering a role like this, that's the case for you too. You want to protect them from burnout and empower them to be their best selves in the craft. At a fundamental level, protecting and nurturing your team is at odds with human resourcing their labor. I just want to acknowledge that. Yet I do think that here on the ground, you can be an earnest, empowering, nurturing manager and still be an advocate for your team. Whew, that was heavy. Let's get back to the topic at hand. So I started at Adobe in January 2017. It was just me on the team, a solo practitioner. You can see me here at a big bank of desks, just all by my lonesome. Then by early 2018, we had just hired our second and third content designers, Marissa and Sarah, and I had been there for a little over a year. It was a huge victory for me. I successfully convinced product leadership that my role was valuable enough to invest more in content design. I was already acting as a traffic manager with my teammates, helping them prioritize their work and shielding them from a lot of unnecessary noise that could keep them from making a big impact. Sean Charis, the director of Central Design Practices and my boss, laid it all out on the table for me. More than a few years before, when I was interviewing, I had told him that I didn't want to be a people manager for all the reasons I explained before. And Marissa and Sarah made it clear that they weren't interested. Sean told me, "Andy, you're already leading this team. I can't keep adding direct reports as the team grows. Do you want to be a manager, or should we hire somebody else to do it?" Well, that really said it for me. I couldn't bear the idea of kind of letting somebody else steer the direction that I had a very clear vision for. So obviously I said yes, and I'm really glad that I did. It's been an incredibly rewarding experience to be able to grow this group of people into a full-fledged team. Here are the folks in the team at this moment as of February 18th, 2022, and I love and support and trust each one of them. It's a great team. So as I teased earlier, there's a difference between leadership and management. And it's probably something you'll hear throughout this conference. So I'll just try to tease them apart. A good leader can build coalition and align people around strategies and solutions to hard problems. A good leader can build trust and relationship with partners, particularly decision makers and executives. A good leader should mentor their teammates and help them and grow and develop in their careers. I think a manager should do each and every one of these things, but there's really a list of bullets that I think we can distill a manager's job down to. Author Julie Zhu in The Making of a Manager really summed this up really well. It's a great book. You should really read it. She says a manager's job is to build a team that works well together, support members in reaching their career goals, and create processes to get work done smoothly and efficiently. Ideally, you're doing all of these things as a manager. Ideally, a good manager is also a good leader. I'm still absolutely learning and figuring things out as I grow, sometimes failing and learning from that. But over the last few years, I feel like I've learned a few really big lessons. And I figured I might share some of those lessons with you today. Let's talk about each one of these things. And when we're done, I really just want to give you some words of encouragement. So let's jump into this. First, let's pay attention to org structures. When I started Adobe, I didn't care one bit about org structures. Who reports to who, what a team's relationship is to another team. Adobe is a very big, very siloed. Those abstract structures are pretty complicated. Doesn't seem real or tangible, does it? We all have Slack and email and video conferencing. I can easily communicate with anybody at the company. So why do these abstract barriers matter? Pretty quickly, I learned that navigating those structures deftly can mean the difference between getting resources and growing a team and setting yourself up or a potential team for failure. It's vital to understand these strategic goals, incentives, and the motivations of people across the company. It's a really great article on Medium by Cindy Sridharan, Copy Construct on Twitter. She has an article about becoming a more effective engineer through understanding org structures. And I think that a lot of this is true for content designers as well. It's a lot of text, but I'll try to kind of sum it up here. Cindy says, one of the most effective things you can do to be successful at your job is to understand how your organization works. This understanding will better inform your outlook on everything from what technical skills you need to invest effort into getting better, and also what will be actually rewarded, how to build long-lasting relationships with other people in your team or organization that will ultimately dictate the success of a project, how to effectively pitch projects or improvements and see those through to completion, how to navigate ambiguity, which is a huge one, how to manage conflicting priorities or expectations, how to deal with setbacks, how to weigh the pros and cons of technical choices in the larger context of the organization, how to identify and drive quick wins, how to discern what's achievable in precisely what time frame, how to use this knowledge to judiciously pick battles, and in the worst case, how to know when to cut your losses and quit, which is a really important thing to know. You can read this full article, which I really recommend, at a link that I'll provide in the notes to this talk. So what do we mean by those org structures? Well, let me expertly draw for you a very detailed map of Adobe's job structure. So you have Adobe, of course. And within Adobe, we have a few different software suites that have a pretty different functions and audiences, from our creative tooling to document management tools, to our marketing and data analytics enterprise software. And each one of these has their own business units with product management, product marketing, and engineering teams within it. So Adobe Design, my organization, sits horizontally across all these businesses and provides UX services to them all. And my team, the Adobe Design Content Strategy team, sits centrally within there. We are allocated to product teams through the business, from Photoshop and other Creative Cloud experiences to Acrobat to Experience Cloud products and platforms, and even for centralized design initiatives like our design system team. And although all of these teams, organizations, and business units are the same company, they all have different goals, metrics, and strategic focuses, and I depend on them for headcount and for growth. They, on the other hand, don't manage these folks. So what if I decide to move somebody off their product area and onto another? Why would they trust me, some random guy who works for this random director in the design organization who's always going on about why writing is designing? It's because as much as I've taken the time to talk with their design leaders, their product managers, their product marketing teams, and all sorts of stakeholders to understand what they need and how content design can help them accomplish that. When we were working on working with the Photoshop product team to get a dedicated Photoshop content designer, their VP said to me, "Andy, if I can get you headcount, I really expect them to stay on our product. I don't want them to focus on Photoshop just until the next big release. I expect somebody to really build a relationship with our team, to learn about our users, and to understand the history of Photoshop." That really struck with me. I had assumed that was understood, right? But to that point, the VP didn't know a thing about me or my plans. I had to spend time building a trusting relationship with them to show them that I understood their needs and how we could help. Understanding needs is such a big part of this job. And just as you need to understand the needs of the business, once you have a team, you have to figure out what your reports need from you. This is pretty obvious, right? But I think it's really, really vital to get right. And it's harder than it may seem. Sometimes your team doesn't know what they need from you, and it's up to you to help figure that out. When I worked at Facebook about 5 years ago, you can tell I worked at Facebook because in this picture I have a hoodie on. I was the lone content strategist on the search team. The search experience was undergoing a huge transformation, and it represented a mental model shift for users. One of my tasks was to figure out how to make it easier for users to understand this new system. And I was struggling. There was just so much ambiguity in that ask, and it required getting the whole team, including our VP, to understand what I was thinking and recommending. My manager was Aaron Chimay, a super talented content design director who gave a talk at Button last autumn about, ironically, being a leader as an IC. But at that point, she was a people manager. She was my manager. And I think she sensed that I was struggling to influence the fast-paced folks on my team. In our weekly one-on-ones, I wasn't sure how to ask for help. I didn't know what I didn't know I needed. Finally, Aaron suggested, "Andy, what you need to do is learn how to make a pitch deck." And she spent hours with me on helping refine the message, stay on task, and genuinely how to communicate and really hone in on my ideas and slides. I didn't know it at the time, but this was a huge important shift in the way that I think and communicate. And it really helped me figure out how to communicate big problems and solutions and strategies to executives and stakeholders. It's absolutely what I needed at the time. People have shifting needs depending on their experiences, their stage in their careers, and even what their mental state is at that very moment. What are some of the things your team may need, but they're not quite sure how to ask for, how to express? Maybe they need a gut check to see if they handled something in the right way. Maybe they need help seeing the bigger picture. They need help understanding who to connect with or what to do next. Maybe they just need explicit permission to take a break or to slow down. And you as their manager are in a perfect position to help them figure this out. So on my team, for example, I have a very senior person who knows exactly what they need. We talk for 45 minutes to an hour each week, and we check in on everything. They want to share feelings, emotions, decisions, and directions. You know what? And that's great. I'm happy to be a sounding board for them. I also have somebody on my team who's a bit more junior. And in our regular one-on-ones, it can feel a little bit like pulling teeth to get them to tell me what they need. I have to be pretty persistent in figuring that out so I can help them. I found that really good, useful one-on-ones are an art and science that honestly, I'm still getting the hang of as a manager. It's the main tool I have to use to check in with my team and have an ongoing conversation about them and their work. Typically, it might go something like this. We might spend a few minutes talking about our day or to tell a story, or maybe I'll show them a pencil that I just got or something like that. I usually ask, what are you working on? We discuss what they have going on. What sort of projects do they have on their plate? Do they have a lot of meetings? How are they feeling about their workload? We usually have a list of agenda items to discuss. Maybe it's logistics, like, can I expect my registration to Tempo? Or maybe it's about some PTO they have coming up. It usually leads to some action items for them. Or for me, maybe I need to request budget for them to attend the conference. Or maybe they're going to go check their schedule to see when they scheduled their vacation. Occasionally, I might have some critical feedback, like that meeting last week, I think you could have handled it better, and here's how. I also really like to praise when I can, both in front of others and within our one-on-ones, and say, great job with that deliverable. Everybody loved it. We try to talk regularly about more long-term things, like set goals for promotion or to follow up on those goals. You know, stuff that's not necessarily about their work stream, but might be more about their career development. Sometimes this one-on-one can be awkward or stilting. Or if you're like me, you have weeks where you're at your limit and just want to curl up in a ball and talk to no one. It can be so many meetings, but it's absolutely vital to your success and to the success of your team. Part of knowing what your team needs and knowing how to help them succeed is, important to know. It's important to know your strengths and your gaps and the strengths of each person on your team. At Adobe, our design team encourages us to take Gallup's Clifton Strengthsfinder test, which is an easy way to start to understand your strengths. I'm pretty skeptical about things like this, which can sometimes feel like workplace astrology, but I think it can be a really good starting point, a baseline to understand what energizes you and what depletes you. The basis of this framework is that there are 4 broad domains of leadership strength: executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And within those domains, there are individual attributes that reflect our strengths. When we act in alignment with those strengths, we're at our best. So after taking the test, I saw that my strengths are connectedness. I always help see the bigger picture and help others find purpose. I'm a relator. I like to build trusting and developing deep relationships. I find individualization important. I'm intrigued by people's unique qualities and how they fit into the whole. I'm a developer. No, not that kind of developer. I see potential in others, and I try to help develop that. And finally, input. I like to collect things, ideas, and compiling knowledge. And when I put that on a chart, it shows that I lean very heavily into the relationship building portion of the scale. I have little strategic thinking, but basically I have no executing skills, which tracks. I'm a terrible executor. Something useful in this chart shows me is where there is a need on my team for other complementing strengths. Having some strong executors, influencers, and strategic thinkers will round out our team and really let us play to our strengths to succeed. Now, I'm not going to make people take this test when we interview them, but it does give me a really good baseline for understanding what candidates would add value to our team. If you already have a team, it might be an interesting idea for an offsite to get everyone to take the Strengthsfinders test and compile the results. You can have some really great conversations about complementary strengths and where your team has opportunities to grow. Sometimes this can be really a hard thing to do. So many of us are affected by similarity bias, where we prefer what is like us to be, as opposed to what is different. So I know I have to be really careful about just hiring a bunch of relationship builders like me. And honestly, this can make your life so much easier, having people in other complementary strengths. I, for one, am terrified of building and documenting process. I understand how important it is, but I hate it when something is rigid and inflexible because, well, that's what the instructions say we should do. But teams need process if they want to be more efficient and effective and to scale better. I have people on my team who excel at process, and our team is absolutely the better for it. It just takes a little bit of time to recognize that. It's important to lead by example and to model the boundaries for you and for your team. Something that I didn't realize would happen when I became a manager is that suddenly my opinions, thoughts, and actions were taken a lot more seriously. Small or arbitrary decisions or documentations that I put together as a lone practitioner can sometimes become canon. And I sense that people sometimes feel uncomfortable telling me if they thought we should revisit something. I found myself saying, look, I wrote that down quickly to solve a specific problem. Please rework it if you think there's room for improvement. I'm called upon often to weigh in on something, and it feels like I'm a celebrity judge on a competition show, and I'm just there to give my hot take, which, let's be honest, can feel really cool at times. But other times I'm feeling I'm just making it up. Why on earth is what I think so important? Back in early March 2020, when people were starting to understand the seriousness of COVID, but before companies were shutting down the offices, Adobe started telling everyone that if they wanted to work from home for a couple of weeks, it was fine. At the time, I didn't really have a great place at home to work, so I always felt like I was more productive and focused in an office. So I was still coming in. But pretty quickly, I noticed that a few people on my team who really wanted to work from home and were growing more concerned about COVID were reluctant to do so because, well, I was still in the office, even though I was telling them, it's okay, work from home. So I figured I better practice as I preach, and I started working from home a good week or two before everything shut down. And because I announced my plans to everyone on the team, it gave them implicit permission to do the same. This isn't some great heroic move on my part, but it's a great example of how we can model behaviors and boundaries that we want our teams to follow. I'll just kind of read you what I wrote here. Hey, at here. I know it's been a week for everyone. I just want you to know from the bottom of my heart that I appreciate you all, and this is good work you're doing here. The world is scary right now. I was writing this on March 6, 2020, and it feels like it's falling apart. But getting to work with you all is still one of the best and most fulfilling parts of my life. I also want you to know that the next week, I'm going to start to commit to working from home all week. I'm a terrible work from homer, but I think it's really important right now. I don't know if Adobe is going to mandate we all work from home for a few weeks, but it does feel inevitable. Andy, you sweet summer child. Please feel free to do the same. But also, if you would rather come into the office at the moment, you're still welcome to do so. Thank you for continuing to do what you do. And somebody in my team responded and said, thanks, Andy. The feeling is mutual. Getting to work with you and everyone on this team is tops, and I count my lucky stars each day. I'll also be working from home all of next week and possibly longer. Here's some other ways that you can lead by example. They sound obvious, but I think it's worth going over. Don't send emails or Slacks at night. Does your company have no meeting Fridays? Well, don't schedule or take meetings on Fridays. And also take your PTO, especially if your company does unlimited PTO. It's really, really important that you're showing that, you know what, unlimited PTO doesn't mean no PTO. Give yourself permission to take a break, and you are implicitly giving your team permission. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about this, how emotional labor is part of the job that you're doing. The term emotional labor has a lot of meaning, or at least its definition has broadened a bit, but I want to offer some specifics of what I mean when I say that term, which is the way that Arlie Hochschild used the term in The Managed Heart from 1983. Dr. Hochschild is an author and a retired sociologist at the University of California, Davis. She's widely credited for coining the term emotional labor. And by that, she uses it in a professional sense. She says that it's the paid work that you do, which involves trying to feel the right feelings for the job. This involves evoking and suppressing feelings. Some jobs require a lot of it, like an airline attendant or a social worker. And some jobs require a little of it, like jobs that require very little interpersonal interactions. She talks about how, for example, flight attendants are trained to account for passengers' emotions during their flight. They serve food and drinks. They sometimes give passengers orders to feel safe. They pay close attention to first-class passengers to make sure they feel attended to. And they even have special training to control a passenger's emotions during turbulent flights or in an emergency while suppressing their own fears. This job requires an incredible amount of emotional labor. As UX professionals, particularly as writers who encode information into experiences, we're not too far off from that. While we're not usually in an enclosed cabin with our users high in the sky, thank God, we usually try to take stock of their emotions and maintain and manage it at every step of their journey with our products, from encouraging signups to helping them feel not confused or upset when encountering error states or stress cases. Sometimes we take on emotional labor that's squarely outside of the scope of their job, of our job, which is a whole different talk. That mixed with the pressures of working with some strong personalities with sometimes overlapping or conflicting goals, our team's emotional labor spills over, and they need you to help manage their emotions. And that's where you as manager step in. You can't be effective if you draw a boundary between managing somebody's work and managing their emotions. Those things are too interconnected. Sometimes your team will come to you with a bubbling over of positive emotion, the elation of shipping something they worked hard on, or even a particularly good research session where they learned a lot. It's a pleasure to support them and uplift them in their joy in that case. But much of the time, you need to help your team manage in more difficult emotions. Your team members need to process feelings or get advice or unload their conscience. And if you've built up trust with them, they'll do it with you. I've had several instances of somebody on our team break down and cry in a one-on-one with me after a meeting that went badly or a frustrating experience with a stakeholder. It's tough. Or if you've never been in a position like that, it's hard. But your job is at that point to acknowledge and validate their feelings. But you're not a therapist, right? Of course not. Every dynamic is different, and what works for me and my team may not be how you approach it with your team. It's important to find the right balance between emotional honesty and emotional management. You want to be authentic and transparent, but you also want to make sure that you don't project your own cynicisms, negativity, or anxieties on your team, because they're probably finally attuned to that. And to be effective here, to take on the emotional labor of managing your team, you need to take care of yourself. I don't know about you, but this is an ongoing challenge for me. I like to think of myself as somebody with a high EQ, emotional quotient, which can confidently take that on. But there are recent times when my emotional bandwidth was super full and I just wanted to hide under my desk and talk to no one. It's hard to take on emotional labor when you're already working the emotional equivalent of 80 hours a week. I think this can be especially true for women in UX, particularly women with families who take on a disproportionate amount of labor from their families, from their workplace, and from society in general. But broadly, there's some things that we can start to do about this to try to take this on, to take care of yourself before you take care of your team. Well, first, it's important to set boundaries. We talked a little bit about this before, but I want to stress how important it is for your own health and psychological safety that you aren't always available 24/7. Mark part of your day as a meeting blackout. Take walks. Use the Headspace app to recenter yourself. Share the labor. Pass it on to your boss. You can't do this alone. It's important that your manager can help you process your emotions. If you don't have that kind of support up the chain, well, it can be lonely and isolating. I've been there before. Thirdly, get therapy. See a therapist. This is something I've been thinking about lately. My sister-in-law is a social worker, and as a way to ease the stress on her from her job, where she does loads of emotional labor, she goes to therapy herself. What if we, as people managers, did this as well? Becoming a people manager is perhaps the most challenging thing I've ever done in my career, and that includes planning events for thousands of people, writing a book, and even working in the PC department at Best Buy in the late 90s. For me, it's always been the most rewarding. I've built a team that I trust and I'm proud of. They do really great work. And you're going to do great work. It'll be a challenging, interesting, sometimes boring, though most of the time exciting experience. You got this. I can't wait to see how you help our industry grow and develop. Thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you around Tempo.